Hey everyone, I'm your host Cadence, and welcome back to another episode of Project Honesty. This is a podcast by a young adult, for young adults, to acquire unfiltered advice and bold opinions, as well as take deep dives into the issues shaping our world. We'll challenge ideas, explore new perspectives, and have fun while navigating the ups and downs of life. This is Project Honesty, where truth meets curiosity and every conversation matters. If you haven't already, go check out last week's episode called My Welcome Back. This episode is short but sweet, and that was my first time in over a month recording an episode for the podcast again. And I am happy to say that I am back. Tune into that episode for life updates, updated goals, and visions for the podcast moving forward. That is available on Spotify and YouTube. If you haven't been keeping tabs on our social media, which I highly recommend you do, on especially Instagram, Project_Honesty24 is our Instagram. That is where we release every single weekly topic. This week's topic is an in-depth analysis into mental health and its link to hyperindependence, burnout, and grief. There's also going to be a little bit of a bonus section about learning to take a break, as well as managing your goals and mental health. Taking a look at the current picture of today's mental health landscape, mental health issues globally are on the rise. That's according to statistics from the World Health Organization. Around 1 in 8 people in the world live with a mental disorder. And to kind of legitimize that number, it's around 970 million people. Depression and anxiety disorders are the most common, and they account for over 300 million people worldwide. Narrowing it down to Canada, 39% of people aged 15 to 24 reported that their mental health was worse than it was before the pandemic. That was taken from Stats Canada in 2022. And overall, only 60% of those who need mental health services actually receive them. So think about it. Only 60%, which is a little bit more than half, of 970 million people, approximately, actually get the help for the disorders that they need to attend to. This has a lot to do with stigma. As far as we have come in society, there's still a stigma around mental health. There's also a lack of access to care, especially if you do not live in an area that is an urban setting. And there seems to be a societal pressure to constantly and consistently perform. This is especially common among youth and women, and that kind of intensifies these mental health challenges. There's also been, within the last couple of years, this cultural shift, and I notice it most among women, towards celebrating the hustle and idolizing self-sufficiency. And that kind of leads us into the next topic, which is the link between hyperindependence and burnout. For those who don't know, and you might know because I talk about it on here a lot because I experience it, hyperindependence is a form of extreme self-reliance, and it often arises from trauma, such as childhood neglect, emotional invalidation, or a loss of trust. I would say if I had to dwindle my hyperindependence down to a reason, it would be for a lot of trust that I've lost in my life with certain individuals that has heightened my want for hyperindependence. Hyperindependence is characterized by refusing help even when you're overwhelmed, internalizing the belief that depending on others is a weakness, and I've learned the hard way that it is most definitely not a weakness, and you also tend to overfunction in your relationships and work life. Now, this behavior, and I know this from personal experience, can initially feel empowering. Talking from personal experience, I feel very empowered when I am able to do something independently. Over time, though, it will increase your stress, it can isolate you, and this feeds directly into burnout. Burnout, as defined by the World Health Organization, is a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. It involves emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal efficacy. Now, the thing is, burnout, yes, is defined by the health organization as these 3 things, but burnout depends on who you are. Burnout looks different. Just like how mental health issues look different on everyone, so does burnout. Though burnout is commonly associated with workplaces, students, caregivers, and artists specifically are just as vulnerable. The link between the two and research from the American Psychological Association in 2021 indicates that people who score high in self-sufficiency beliefs are more likely to experience higher stress levels, lower coping abilities, and greater emotional suppression. In a survey of 1,500 adults by Better Up Labs in 2022, those who identified themselves as highly independent were 67% more likely to report severe fatigue, 52% more likely to feel emotionally disconnected from others, and 45% more likely to experience sleep disruptions. Hyperindependence as a whole can lead to self-neglect, which then depletes emotional reserves and leaves people, like myself, unprepared to process stress or grief. This next section is really important to me personally because this is something that I will consistently work on, I think, the rest of my life, but that I've had to really focus on within the last couple of months. And one of the reasons that you guys didn't hear me for a month. And it's when and how to take a break. There are a couple different signs that you need a break, but it all starts with recognizing, acknowledging, and validating your burnout or mental exhaustion as early as possible. And common signs that you need to take a break, and this has a lot to do with mental health and burnout, is you dread even the small tasks, and everything feels like a challenge rather than just something you have to do. So examples that I've gathered from my life is like filling the gas tank, getting out of bed in the mornings, showering or bathing. I will always preach transparency on here because I want to show what a real raw life looks like and sounds like. And like there was a couple weeks in March I went a week without showering. I didn't do my laundry. I was re-wearing the same clothes. I was just wearing my hair back because I didn't want to wash it. I would let my gas tank run till empty because stopping at the gas station felt like such an overwhelming task. Getting out of bed, there were some mornings where I heard the alarm and instantly knew I don't want to get out of bed. I'm just going to skip what I had to do that day so I could stay in bed. Again, these look differently on everybody, but those are just some examples from my life. There's also one, and I touched on this a little bit in last week's episode, is physically, you're feeling physically sick more often. I talked about how I was basically chronically sick for a month and a half because of how hard I was pushing myself, and I didn't give myself enough time to stop and breathe. And you feel really emotionally numb, and this can cause irritability. Emotional numbness sucks. It's honestly, for me especially, it is draining to be numb. And I don't necessarily know why. I'm not a psychologist, and I will never claim to be. But numbness is a barrier to things that are really, really important in your life. And that can also feed into losing interest in things that once brought you joy. An example that I can provide for this is there were some days, I love being an actor. I've been an actor for a couple of years now, but I've always been a performer. And that brings me joy. Telling stories through my body and with my voice are the things that make me the happiest. But sometimes over the last 3 months, I didn't want to go to rehearsal. I didn't want to get up in the morning and go take a drama class. I didn't want to do all of that, even though those things are extremely fulfilling to me. I was losing the simple interests that keep me happy. And one of my biggest pieces of advice for this is kind of a self-check. If you're waking up and already fantasizing about an escape, disappearing, quitting, isolating, that is a time to step back. That is a time you need to break. If it's getting to the point where that is the first thing you think of when you wake up, and I'm saying this from personal experience, it's time to take a break. I want to talk about now of ways to take a meaningful break. I didn't Originally, I didn't really want to put this section in because I didn't have a great definition of what meaningful breaks meant. But after kind of analyzing both statistics and myself, I was able to dwindle it down to around 4 points. So the first strategy on taking meaningful breaks is micro breaks. So little things that are 5 to 15 minutes to reset your brain during work or school. So walks, stretching, stepping into nature. And there's actually science behind the fact that a 10-minute walk can boost your mood for up to 2+ hours. Number 2 is mental health days. Oh my goodness. I will continue to preach that everybody needs a mental health day because I take them myself, and I hate people that don't believe in mental health days because that's just insane to me. Mental health days are very much like a call it what it is. It's a rest day to do nothing. You sometimes need to do nothing. You need to not have something going on all the time. And I know this from personal experience. Sometimes it sucks to constantly be doing something. You as a human need a break. And so on these days, you can cry, sleep, or even just breathe. I think thinking of an example of what a mental health day looked for me over the overlap between February and March was crying and sleeping. I was only getting 3 to 4 hours a night consistently, literally on average. It was 3 or 4 nights. Just go look at my Garmin app. It'll show you that. But my mental health days consisted of trying to get as much sleep as possible, eating not that much, and crying. And a little side note, crying is okay. Please cry. It is therapeutic to cry, and everybody needs to cry whether you like it or not. You gotta do it sometimes. There's also an essential part of meaningful breaks is staying creative and engaged. So engaging in activities that have no pressures or pressure of an outcome specifically. So painting for yourself, dancing, singing, this can all reset the emotional balance and reduce your cortisol levels up to 25% in a single session. And number 4, and I think number 4 is something we put in the back of our brains, I think for a reason, biologically, is reconnecting with your body. So yoga, somatic therapy, or just simply learning to do breathing exercises consciously slows down the sympathetic nervous system, which means your fight or flight mode. And when you're constantly in fight or flight mode, your cortisol is going through the roof. Cortisol is your stress hormone, by the way. And you can't, a human cannot function consistently in fight or flight without hitting a roadblock at some point. Fight or flight mode is necessary when it needs to be. It is not necessary all the time. And a key reminder for meaningful breaks, and something that I still consistently learn, is that a break isn't laziness, and instead it's a necessary interruption to avoid a collapse. That is why, mainly, I took the break from the podcast for a month, is because I was nearing a point of a complete mental break, and I was like, well, I have some things that are in my control that I can control and mitigate, and if the podcast and taking a break from that was something that I needed to do, then that was a meaningful and necessary interruption. A section that I've added in here as well is about managing depression and grief while trying to stay present. Understanding the two things, grief and depression, they do overlap a lot, but despite their overlap, they are distinct. Grief is a response. It sends waves of emotions, but you're able to maintain some self-worth, and hope does sometimes feel within reach. Depression, on the other hand, however, may arise without a specific cause, and it is persistent sadness and numbness. It doesn't come and go, it stays, and it often includes self-loathing, and hope in general feels very out of reach. The two both share symptoms like fatigue, sadness, withdrawal, and disrupted sleep. Some tips for navigating the two while trying to stay present in life. I've broken it down, I think, into 5 different sections. Yeah, 5. The first one is practicing gentle presence, grounding yourself. So thinking of what am I seeing? What am I touching? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? Breaking the simple things down and really analyzing that can have a grounding effect on you. And that leads to kind of the ability to still stay present and just recognize that, like, you're okay. Number 2 is really, really important, but it is also one of the hardest things to do, is breaking the loop of isolation. Depression will lie to you. It tells you that you're a burden. So it is your responsibility to kind of counter that with human connection. So texting a friend, joining a grief support circle, or calling a helpline. This human contact, even if it's minimal, can stimulate the oxytocin that you need and reduce the pain that you're feeling in that moment. And I think also talking about navigating how to stay present when you're depressed and anxious and grieving is kind of reframing what presence means to you. Being present doesn't mean you have to be happy while you're present. It means that you have to be real. You can be grieving and still notice that the sun is shining. You can be depressed and still laugh at something funny on Instagram. It's more about allowing for that complexity and knowing that it's okay to feel joy and sorrow at the same time. Again, it's going back to balance. There's always a balance and you need to find it. And then there's also seeking integrated support. Therapy, as much as I don't feel like I've benefited from any therapy that I've ever experienced in my whole life, therapy is powerful. And so is like yoga. That's a form of therapy. Art therapy, peer circles, and writing. When grieving, especially after something that's traumatic, consider grief-informed therapy or narrative therapy. This kind of therapy can help you reshape the story of your loss into something you can carry rather than be crushed by. And kind of to conclude that section, burnout, grief, and depression are not failures of your character. They are simply your biological responses to overload, loss, and disconnection. So hyperindependence, as much as it might feel like a strength, often isolates us from the very support systems that could help us heal. Remembering that rest, softness, and honesty aren't signs of a personal weakness, they're signs of being human. I wish I had a bumper sticker that said, it's okay to be human, because I think we always feel like we have to be programmed to have a certain emotional strength and response to things that happen in life and things that are thrown at us. But in actuality, like, it is this, the reality of this situation is very, very different. It's not always going to be linear, and reaching out for help is never a bad thing. And also, take that break. Let yourself feel. I have recently gone back to thoughts that we all have the privilege of the human experience. And I use privilege very intently. And I think, like, we have the ability to take advantage of the emotions that are thrown at us and instead use them as fuel into creating our story and deepening and lengthening what our life looks like. And I want everybody to remember that even in the depths of very hard mental challenges, you are never as alone as you think you are. And I promise you, that is something that I know is very hard to remember, but there is a lot of people out in this world that love you. You gotta know that. Well, there are so many people that are willing to love the exact person that you are. And it's kind of up to finding those people who will carry you in your hardest moments. Now I want to jump into a section about managing the balance and finding the balance between your mental health and achieving your goals. And it really all starts with redefining what success means to you. Success to everybody, comes in different forms and from different things and is defined in different ways. And a lot of burnout comes from chasing someone else's version of success. So their numbers, their status, their hustle. But your mental health will thrive when your goals align with your values. Ask yourself a few things before you pursue something that you find is a definition of success. So does this goal energize you, or does it deplete you? Are you doing this for love, or are you doing it for approval? And the third one is this something that I want, or something I think I should want? When your goals feed your spirit, they become more sustainable. I know that for me as an actor, performing and storytelling and all of these things feeds my soul. I am the person that I am because of what I do. And I think, and that again in itself is a privilege. Not everybody gets to do that. And I think like that is something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And that is something that like a lot of people around me have said, like, that's not a real career. That's not something you should pursue. But it's about blocking those kind of people out. They are allowed to think that success is a different thing, but it really dwindles down to you really enforcing the fact that you think success is the way you think it is. And I'm saying it like that, and it sounds kind of weird, but it's true. I don't know everyone else's definition of success. And sometimes I don't even know my own definition of success. And I think it's about like finding that for yourself. And the next one is something that I've tried to embrace over the last little bit, is prioritizing rhythms over routines. I am someone who is obsessed with Google Calendar and schedules and all of this, and routines are very rigid. And so instead, I've tried building rhythms. So flexible habits that ebb and flow with your energy. So for example, this is creative work when your mind is fresh and wants to do it. Movement or quiet time after tasks that are emotionally draining and heavy. Or just even some space in your week for spontaneous things or joy, stillness, whatever it is. And I've noticed that rhythms will let you stay consistent like a routine without forcing yourself to perform when you're drained. The next point is something that I've learned and will probably continue to learn for a while because I still don't take this advice, is not just scheduling work, but also scheduling the recovery. We tend to plan our workload down to the minute. And that again is a societal pressure that I think we all feel in different ways. But we most likely will forget to plan rest. And so some strategies to this is breaking it down to daily, weekly, and monthly recovery. Daily recovery can look like a 10-minute mindfulness break. So just even like staring out the window or lying in bed for 10 minutes, that can be mindful. When it comes to weekly recovery, that can be 1 to 2 hours of non-productive rest where you're not multitasking and you feel no guilt taking that break. And then when it comes to monthly, is 1 full day off from the pressure. Again, like a mental health day, relieving you of emotional, academic, and social pressures. And recovery isn't optional. You'll figure that out eventually if you're not taking a break. It's how your nervous system builds resiliency. And so eventually, whether or not you like it, you're gonna have to find time to recover. And one thing that is really important to keeping you motivated and keeping you on track, and something that's actually really good for your mental health, is making space for the tiny mini wins. Celebrating these wins. So like, I showed up even though I was anxious, or reflecting weekly on things that you did and not just things you didn't get to do. It's a lot of dissecting into your life, but it is really helpful when it comes to managing mental health and goal chasing, is really celebrating the little things. I don't think we give enough attention to the little things in life, but when we do, it makes us just happier humans. It's also really important to build a system, build a support system that honors your drive and your limits. I'm going to focus on the word honors for a second. Everybody has varying work ethics, but you need somebody who sees your work ethic and your drive and your ability and want and hunger for your goals and goes, damn, like you're working fucking hard. That congratulations. You need somebody to do that. Hyper independence can sneak in when you're ambitious. I would know. Ask anybody in my life. They can attest to this fact. But remember, no one climbs every mountain alone. That quote kind of put things into perspective for me. Like, you will need help in your life. You cannot do everything by yourself. I tell myself this daily. You cannot do everything by yourself. As much as you want to try, you can't. You will need help sometimes, and that's okay. And in this circle and system, you want to be able to talk about the ugly side of ambitions. So the doubt that you feel, fear, failures, all of those things, you need an outlet to kind of talk about those. Because discussing your personal failure and fears is not easy. And so you need a system that supports you when you decide to be vulnerable in those moments and talk about that. And also, you need a circle that encourages you to rest without feeling like you're letting them down. I know that my friends, like when I was like, hey, I can't show up to school for the next 2 days. I can't even get myself out of bed. They were like, we're here for you. Like, you've got it. That's okay. Like, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to not be here sometimes. And it's nice, like, as much as it's important to stay present, I think you can also take a step back from being present and really focus on yourself. It's not selfish to think about yourself. I will repeat that till the day that I die. It is not selfish to think about yourself sometimes. And you also need to find people that believe in your potential without pressuring you to constantly perform. Oh my God. This point is something that is so vital to goal chasing. You need someone to be like, oh yeah, you can do really big things, but they are not constantly on your ass about things that you haven't even gotten to yet. And instead they just like provide that consistent motivation without being overbearing. And then one of the last things here that I want to bring up is letting your visions be big, but the steps be gentle. It's okay to want to change the world and to lead and to perform and to create something powerful. I understand this because this is my entire life. My whole goal in life is to be a game changer, to do things that most people don't want to do. That is like what I want to do for the rest of my life. But you have to remember that pace matters. Burnout will never ever serve your long-term visions. Presence matters. So if you miss the beauty of now, what's the point? You got to take a minute to stop and look around and see just the sheer amount of beautiful things that are around you. And you also got to remember people matter. Bring others with you, mentors, friends, therapists, allies. People really are the puzzle pieces to what makes life what it is. And one of my last points on here that I want to bring up that is important to me and I want to share with all of you is that you can be driven and still be soft. And you can chase greatness without chasing pain. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Project Honesty. You can check us out on social media. Our Instagram is project_honesty24. Our TikTok is project.honesty. Our website is linked in our Instagram bio, and we are available for listening on Spotify and YouTube. If you enjoy listening to Project Honesty, share us with friends and family, and you can direct them to the Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, website, or TikTok to help them learn more. Remember to subscribe, follow, and click the bell icon for updates when I post, and remember, the more listeners, the bigger the family.